buckle up, because today we're diving headfirst into the wild legal saga of Andrew Tate.
Yeah, this case is really something else, huh? A fascinating blend of online fame accusations in this digital age we live in, and the unique hurdles that wealth can throw into legal battles.
This guy, Andrew Tate, he seems to live a life ripped straight out of a movie,
Hmm.
with all the luxury cars and bold opinions. But now he's facing some seriously heavy allegations.
Right, for those who might not know him, Andrew Tate's a former kickboxing champion who made his way into the world of online influencing. He's known for promoting what he calls an ultra-masculine lifestyle, but his views, particularly his views on women, have stirred up a ton of controversy, and it's actually gotten him banned from various platforms.
Yeah, and now he's got the Romanian authorities on his case. They're accusing him of some very serious crimes.
Yeah.
Human trafficking, rape, even forming a criminal organization to sexually exploit women.
A lot of these accusations stem from his online business involving sex work. In fact, on a webpage that's since been taken down, he described his approach as getting women to fall in love with me to where she'd do anything I say and then get her on webcam so we could become rich together.
Wow, that's a pretty loaded statement to make. And he's staring down some incredibly serious charges. But here's the kicker. He insists he's innocent and claims this whole thing is a politically motivated witch hunt.
It's a defense strategy we often see from high-profile figures. Claiming the prosecution is weaponized and politicized against them. We'll have to wait and see if the evidence backs that up in this case.
Well, the plot thickened recently when a Romanian court decided to lift Tate's house arrest. Seems like a major turn of events, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. It's significant. While he's technically under judicial control, now he has the freedom to move around within Romania.
So it doesn't mean he's completely off the hook.
Nope, not at all.
Okay, so what exactly does this judicial control entail for him?
Essentially, he's under constant watch. He's got to check in with the police regularly, and he's absolutely forbidden from contacting any other suspects or witnesses. You know, the listener should know that while he's not stuck at home anymore, he's not exactly a free man either. He can't leave Romania, and they're tracking his every move.
That's interesting. So the court's giving him a little bit of leeway, but they're definitely keeping him on a tight leash. What I find kind of strange that he's allowed to spend time with his brother Tristan. Even though Tristan is also caught up in this whole case, they've even been spotted together since the ruling.
It is a bit of an ironic twist, and it does make you wonder about the prosecution's case. If they had rock-solid, undeniable evidence, you'd think they'd want to keep the brothers apart and under much stricter control. This loosening of restrictions could maybe hint at some weaknesses in their case.
Could this be a sign that those charges against him might not hold up in court?
It's still too early to say for sure, but it's definitely something to keep a close eye on as this case progresses.
Okay, let's backtrack a bit and retrace the steps of this legal battle. It all started back in December 2022 when he was arrested in Romania. That first indictment was actually thrown out by a court in Bucharest. They cited flaws and sent the whole case back to the prosecutors to do more digging.
Right. And then in August of 2024, a second investigation was launched. This one led to his house arrest. The charges this time around included trafficking minors, sexual intercourse with a minor, and money laundering. So the stakes are much higher now.
And to make matters even more complicated, he's also facing accusations of rape and human trafficking in the UK. So depending on what happens with the Romanian case, he might be extradited to the UK to face those charges too. Yeah. This guy's tangled up in a serious legal web.
It really highlights how messy international legal battles can be, especially with allegations that span across different countries in our globalized world.
Let's delve into Tate's defense strategy. He's been very outspoken, claiming that this whole ordeal is a weaponized and politicized attack against him. Is there any weight to this argument?
Well, we have to acknowledge that corruption can exist in any legal system, but it's crucial to look at the evidence objectively. The fact that the initial indictment was tossed out because of flaws definitely raises some questions. It suggests there might have been some procedural or evidentiary issues with the prosecution's initial approach.
What kind of flaws in an indictment could lead to a dismissal like that? And how could that affect how we view the strength of the case moving forward?
That's a good question. Without knowing the specifics of those flaws, it's hard to say for sure. It's a reminder that legal cases are rarely black and white. They're often incredibly complex and nuanced.
You're right. And that complexity often comes up in cases that involve accusations of sexual assault or trafficking. We often see a delay in these accusations coming to light, which raises questions about the timing. Some people might wonder why the alleged victims didn't speak up sooner.
That's a sensitive point, but it's really important to understand the huge challenges victims in these situations often face. Fear of retaliation, the difficulty of processing trauma, and societal pressures can all make it incredibly hard to come forward.
especially when you're accusing someone as wealthy and influential as Andrew Tate.
Exactly. The power dynamics in these cases are impossible to ignore. The fear of not being believed or facing backlash from someone like Tate, who has very vocal supporters online, can be incredibly intimidating.
It's a sobering reminder that these cases require a lot of careful consideration and sensitivity towards everyone involved. Speaking of which, we can't ignore those money laundering accusations. This is where the story gets even more interesting. In August 2024, Romanian authorities raided 4 properties. It was a 10-hour raid, and they seized a ton of Tate's assets, including a collection of 16 luxury cars.
Mhm.
We're talking McLarens, Ferraris, even a Maybach. It's a car collection most people only dream about.
That raid wasn't just about cars, though. It was about financial records, too. They seized cash, luxury watches, laptops, hard drives, and piles of documents. The prosecutors believe they can connect these purchases to illegal activity, which is the basis of their money laundering accusations.
So they're suggesting that those flashy cars and extravagant belongings weren't acquired through legitimate means. They think they can directly link those purchases to criminal activity.
Exactly. The challenge for the prosecution is proving that the money used for these purchases was obtained illegally. This usually means tracing complex financial transactions, which could even cross international borders. It's a very meticulous process that requires strong evidence to make a solid case.
So this is where forensic accounting comes into play, right?
Yeah.
They'll be looking for any inconsistencies, any hidden transactions, anything that ties those assets back to illegal activities.
Absolutely. The prosecution will be carefully analyzing those financial records, trying to establish a clear link between those luxury car purchases, for example, and funds generated by the alleged trafficking ring. Proving this connection is key to their money laundering case.
I'm starting to see why this case is so intricate, with all these layers and accusations swirling around. And then on top of all that, you've got Tate's political aspirations.
Oh, right. His recent announcement about forming the BRV party, Britain, restoring underlying values, and his aim to run for UK Prime Minister. It definitely grabbed headlines, but it felt more like a publicity stunt than a genuine political move, especially considering he hasn't even filed the necessary paperwork to make it official.
It does seem a bit strange, given the serious legal trouble he's facing in 2 different countries.
Hmm.
And then there's his very public online feud with Sir Eastwood, a member of Parliament from Northern Ireland.
That very public back and forth they had on Twitter highlights how online behavior can have serious consequences, especially for someone in his position. Eastwood, who is a vocal advocate against violence towards women, took legal action against him over certain social media posts. The exact content of those posts isn't public, but they were obviously inflammatory enough to warrant legal action.
So here we have a man facing serious charges, potential extradition, and he's getting into heated online confrontations with politicians. Does that seem like a wise move?
Strategically, it's very questionable. It begs the question, is he really worried about the potential legal repercussions of what he's doing online? Or is he more concerned with maintaining his provocative online persona, even if it could jeopardize his legal defense?
It's like he's living in 2 separate worlds. The flashy, defiant online world and the harsh reality of the legal system. His behavior online seems pretty reckless, considering how serious the charges against him are.
And the big question is, can he successfully navigate both of these worlds? Or will his online persona ultimately backfire and make his legal battles even more complicated? It's a fascinating dilemma that reflects the blurry lines between online personalities and real-life consequences.
We've only just scratched the surface, and we've already uncovered so much.
Yeah, it really makes you think about how power dynamics play out online, especially nowadays. In this crazy connected world, a single tweet or post can have huge consequences, especially for someone like Andrew Tate with such a massive online presence.
It does sometimes feel like the Wild West out there, especially with those blurry lines between, free speech and potential legal trouble. Let's get back to the Romanian case and those seized assets. The authorities didn't mess around. They took everything from those luxury cars to his laptops.
Seizing assets is pretty standard in cases involving financial crimes, like money laundering. It's a way for authorities to kind of cut off a defendant's financial resources, make it harder for them to pay for a strong defense. It also gives them a chance to potentially recover funds that could be used to compensate victims if there's a conviction.
And in Tate's case, they really went all out.
Hmm.
16 luxury cars, cash watches, computers, documents. It's a huge haul.
Mhm.
It does make you wonder about where all his wealth came from. He claims it all comes from his businesses and his online ventures.
Right, and that's where the burden of proof falls squarely on the prosecution. They need to show a clear, undeniable link between those assets and illegal activities. If they want to get a conviction on those money laundering charges,
So it's not just about showing that he's got a lot of money, it's about proving that the money can be traced back to illegal sources.
Exactly. It's about establishing a trail of financial transactions that connect those seized assets to specific criminal activities. That's where forensic accounting comes in. They'll be going through those financial records with a fine-tooth comb, looking for anything suspicious, any hidden transactions, anything that could tie those assets back to illegal activities.
So it sounds like the prosecution's building a case that those flashy cars weren't bought with legitimate earnings, but were actually the result of his alleged criminal enterprise.
That's the narrative they're trying to build. The analysis of those financial records is going to be crucial in determining whether they can actually prove that link beyond a reasonable doubt.
You mentioned earlier that the UK authorities are looking to extradite Tate after the Romanian case wraps up. Given that Romania is part of the EU and the UK isn't, what are the odds of that actually happening?
Extradition between the EU and non-EU countries can be a really long and complicated process. It can get pretty political, too. The UK would have to present a really strong case. They'd need to convince the Romanian authorities that the charges against him in the UK are serious enough to justify extradition.
And those UK charges go all the way back to 2012, right?
Oh,
It
yeah.
seems like a long time for those accusations to come to light.
As we talked about before, the timing of these accusations, especially in cases involving sexual assault or exploitation, is a complicated and sensitive issue. There are all sorts of reasons why victims might not come forward right away. Fear of retaliation is a big one, as is the emotional burden of dealing with trauma. And there are also societal pressures that can make it incredibly difficult to speak out.
And in this particular case, you have to consider Tate's huge and very vocal online following and the potential backlash that those who accuse him might face.
Oh, absolutely. The power dynamics here can't be ignored. Tate's online persona and his wealth could create a chilling effect that makes people afraid to publicly accuse him.
It's a stark reminder that seeking justice isn't always easy. It's a process that needs careful consideration, especially when you're dealing with complex allegations and high-profile individuals. Let's say for a moment that Tate is found guilty on some or all of these charges in Romania. What kind of sentence could he be looking at?
Well, sentencing guidelines vary a lot from country to country, so it's tough to say what the specific outcome might be without knowing all the ins and outs of the case. However, if he's convicted of serious charges like human trafficking or rape, he could be facing a lengthy prison sentence.
And what about those charges in the UK? Could he potentially face separate trials and sentences in both countries?
That's definitely a possibility. It all depends on what happens with the Romanian case and the specifics of the charges he's facing in the UK. It could end up being a long legal battle that spans multiple countries.
This whole case is like a tangled web, and it's clear that this story is far from over. It's a story that makes us confront some uncomfortable truths about accountability online, the challenges of prosecuting international crimes, and the huge difficulties that victims face when they try to come forward.
You've hit on some really important points. This isn't just your typical celebrity scandal. It's a case that sheds light on some bigger societal issues. We need to ask ourselves, how do we balance freedom of speech with the fact that online platforms can be used for harmful purposes? How do we make sure that victims in the digital age get the support and protection they need, especially when accusations can spread so quickly online?
These are big questions that we need to be paying attention to. This deep dive has really highlighted the importance of approaching cases like this with nuance and understanding.
It's crucial to remember that behind the headlines and the legal arguments, there are real people whose lives have been deeply affected by these events.
Absolutely. Regardless of what you think about Andrew Tate's guilt or innocence, we have to acknowledge that there are alleged victims involved. Their voices deserve to be heard, and their experiences need to be acknowledged and respected, no matter what the final legal outcome is.
That's such an important point. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's also about finding the truth, holding people accountable, and helping everyone affected by these situations to heal.
That's a powerful and crucial point. This case raises questions that go way beyond the courtroom. It makes us examine our own beliefs and values. Wow, this deep dive into the Andrew Tate case has really been something else. It's made me think a lot about the influence people have online these days and how that power plays into all the complexities of the legal system.
It is a fascinating case study, isn't it? Andrew Tate built an empire based on his online persona, and now that same persona is being scrutinized under the harsh realities of a courtroom.
Yeah, it's a lot bigger than just one man's story, though.
Yeah.
This case has real consequences, especially for those who've come forward with these serious accusations.
Exactly. We can't lose sight of the human side of this story amidst all the sensational headlines and legal arguments. Real people's lives have been deeply affected by what's happened.
So as we wrap up this episode, what are the key takeaways you think our listeners should keep in mind as this legal saga continues to play out?
Well, first, this case really highlights the challenges of prosecuting crimes like human trafficking in this digital age we live in. It's a global problem, and pursuing justice requires international cooperation, really thorough investigations, and a solid understanding of how these crimes operate in online spaces.
It's not as simple as just catching the bad guys. It's about understanding this intricate web of online platforms, financial transactions, and the exploitation that often happens across borders.
Right. And on a broader societal level, this case forces us to think about the responsibilities that come with online influence. Andrew Tate's situation is a stark reminder that words matter. Those who have big online platforms have to be aware of the potential consequences of what they say, especially when it crosses the line into harmful territory.
It's a wake-up call about how online platforms can be used to spread harmful ideas. And it highlights the importance of thinking critically and being media literate when we're navigating the online world.
And we can't forget about the ongoing challenges faced by victims of sexual assault and exploitation. This is especially true when the accused is wealthy and influential, like in this case. Coming forward is incredibly brave, and we as a society need to support and believe those who speak out, regardless of the circumstances.
We need to create a culture where victims feel safe and empowered to come forward, knowing they will be heard and that their experiences will be taken seriously.
Absolutely. This case is a clear example that the road to justice is rarely straightforward or quick. It's a process that requires patience, thorough investigation, and a real commitment to uncovering the truth, no matter how difficult that may be.
It's not just about reaching a verdict. It's about ensuring a fair and transparent process that upholds the principles of justice for everyone involved.
So to our listener, as you follow this story, I encourage you to think about these questions. What does this case tell us about the evolving landscape of online accountability? How can we as individuals and as a society do better to support victims of exploitation and ensure their voices are heard? And what does a just outcome look like in a case as complicated and multi-layered as this one?
These are some tough questions, but they're important ones to think about as this story continues to unfold. As always, we encourage you to stay informed, engage in thoughtful discussions, and draw your own conclusions as more information comes out. Who knows what twists and turns await us in the next chapter of the Andrew Tate saga?
One thing's for sure, this is a story that's going to keep us on the edge of our seats. It'll challenge our perspectives and force us to grapple with complex questions about justice, online influence, and the human experience in the digital age.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive into the Andrew Tate case. But this is certainly a story we'll be keeping a close eye on, so stay tuned for any updates, and until next time, stay curious.